Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast, episode 771, Snowfall, season 4, episode 8, Betrayal. This was, of course, we are close to the end of this season, just 2 episodes remaining. After this particular episode, this was a big time episode. Some of the themes, well, there really was only one theme to me, and that was out of time. A number of our characters, Franklin, Teddy, and Tanasi, seemingly, seemingly were running out of time in regards to having to deal with situations. Their worlds are colliding and closing in at the same time. So that was the constant theme running throughout the course of this particular episode. We'll get right to the best scenes. So, Manboy and Tanasi. If I'm mispronouncing that name, then so be it. They should have named her Tamika or T. So she meets. So we find out, and this was no surprise. A lot of people on the internet called this from the beginning, or from after the first 3 or 4 episodes of the season, that Tanasi could not be trusted. That he was either a op or undercover or is working for Manboy. I thought, if anything, that the working for Manboy was the more likely of the scenarios, and that turned out to be the case. She was his mole. It's kind of been, we kind of saw some pieces of this scattered throughout the course. If you go back, you really go back and watch this season, Manboy is talking about this plan and things are set in motion. Well, this was part of Manboy's plan to try to take Franklin's plug. He uses Tanasi, um, uses her to get close to Franklin, but at this point, she hasn't, she's gotten close to Franklin, but not close enough to get Manboy to plug. Manboy, of course, comes to her apartment. He is frustrated that he doesn't have the plug, Franklin's plug, and just basically tells her she has by the end of the night to come up with something, or she and her brother are dead. Of course, you remember when she talked about her brother earlier in the season. So I think Manboy, of course, has the kind of power to go to get to her brother in prison. I think her brother's in prison, and he has the kind of power to get to her brother in prison, as well as, of course, kill her easily. So Manboy scares her, and of course Tanasi at this point is under heavy pressure from this king from Manboy, who in the worst way wants Franklin's plug. We go to Jerome, Franklin, Louis at the club. Of course, there everybody is blaming Franklin in regards to what has transpired over the course of not only the last episode, but of course of this entire season. And Franklin goes into one of his, Franklin every 3 or 4 episodes has one of these speeches where he has to remind you that he built this. He's going to get us. He built this, and there's nothing to worry about. So he really goes into a speech where he says, "Listen, if anything happens, I will take the bullet. I'm not gonna let anything happen to any of you, or you're not gonna face any of the consequences. I will deal with this, and like I have in terms of every particular." And he brings up every situation of basically the entire 4 season run of the show. So Franklin goes into his bag as far as saying, "Look, every time we get into some shit, I get us out of it. I got this. Don't worry about it." And it really criticizes Louis and Frank and Jerome and what have you for not showing some sympathy. And again, this episode, the black cloud that was hanging over this episode was, of course, the news that um, the article got printed. Irene's article was printed, so everybody in this episode knows about Franklin. That Franklin is the plug, even though his name wasn't used. Everybody that knows about the CIA. That the CIA is bringing in drugs to America. So that the shit hit the fan from that standpoint. So this episode was really dominated with that particular narrative throughout the course of this episode. Irene's article on the CIA and Franklin and his family and what have you was printed out. So again, Franklin lets everybody know, look, I got this. Like I said, I will take the bullet. Don't worry about it. As Jerome and Louis and the rest and everybody else. Jerome and Louis were definitely concerned. They were definitely concerned and not, feeling good about the future prospects of what possibly can happen. Manboy, Khadijah, and Scully. So Manboy really flexed in this episode, and Manboy lets Khadijah know, look, you need to back off. I have a plan in motion. You gotta be patient. I'm going, and again, they're discussing the article that was printed. They're discussing Irene's article. Manboy has figured the shit out. The Manboy has puts everything together. Says, hey, this is why Franklin's getting that CIA protection. This is why nothing can stick to him. He says, he's basically walking on water. If you got the plug, if we get the plug, we'll be set for life. Khadijah says, Khadijah basically brushes him off, saying, there's no way they're going to give you the plug. Um, and he reminds Khadijah, a situation that he took care of her, for her a while back, and says, he's going to handle business. Scully is just seemingly in awe of Manboy in terms of his scheming and and conniving and cunningness. And at this point, Manboy is basically running the show. Let's be honest, Manboy. If we're ranking who's running the show on their end, it would be Manboy, Khadijah, and Scully. Scully really has taken a back seat over these last couple of episodes, to be honest with you. So Manboy says, "Look, let me handle this." Again, he tells Khadijah, continuously tells Khadijah to back off, as he tries to as he has plans set in motion to take over Franklin's plug. Alden and Sissy. So Alden comes back, to Sissy's dismay. And he basically tries to convince her to come with him to Havana, Cuba. He says he has the passports. He says we could be, we could, before anybody knows it, we could be having dinner in Cuba. Now, Sissy at first was reluctant, saying that you should have basically saying you should have came to me first before you went to the press. Alden somewhat acknowledges that he didn't handle this situation the best, but really is not sorry in terms of what he did. He says it had to be done. You know it, and I know it. Um, Sissy did more listening than talking. I really think Alden got to her as far as uh, in this scene. If you look at you look at the facial, if you look at her body language and how she took in the information in terms of what Alden was saying, I think part of Sissy probably knows Alden probably is right, but still she doesn't want to seemingly anyway. She doesn't want to give away any give out any reason to believe that she's going to betray Franklin. So it came down to that. But again, she did a lot more listening than talking in this particular scene. Um, Jerome and Louis at the club. So Jerome and Louis are at the club by themselves. Jerome says, "Hey, we got to do this funeral for Fatback." Louis, of course. Now, keep in mind, all of them, Franklin, anybody who's connected to Franklin or Leon, connected to Leon, Franklin included, Jerome and Louis included, have a $5,000 bounty on their head, um, courtesy, of course, Khadijah. So Louis wants no part of this funeral. Says we'll be out in the open, and then and Manboy and Scully will come and will be waiting for us, basically. So Jerome's like, look, we have to pay our respects. Of course, Jerome he's coming from the standpoint of he made the deal with Fatback's cousin, and he does not want to renege on that deal as far as taking care of the funeral, showing up, paying their respects. So Jerome says, I'm going to the funeral. I'm not worried about them. I'm not worrying about the bounty. We already, basically we already are in trouble as it is. We already have targets on our head, basically 24/7. So Jerome at this point is kind of immune to the bounty that's on their head. He's gonna go set up the funeral and go pay his respects to the old heads, to Fatback's cousin, in terms of the deal that they made in the previous episode. Again, Louis wanted no part of this funeral whatsoever, and you will find out why later on. Franklin meets Irene at a diner. So he calls her in. He calls calls the newspaper, says, and Irene in the article did not list Franklin's name. She listed him as person X. So he calls Irene, says we need to meet up. They meet at the diner, and basically Franklin gives her a coded threat saying, you really don't want any part of this. This is much bigger than you. He doesn't directly threaten her, but he basically says, listen, the CIA, the government will come at you with everything they have, and they'll come at your loved ones. So, he's speaking truth. We'll see how it plays out, but he basically tells her, like, you don't, like, this is much bigger than you. And so they had that conversation, and she again, she's gonna go. She's already printed. She's already in too deep as it is. The story's been printed. Even her editor says, "Look, the government's gonna come after them," and the government and the Pentagon, they already have. Matter of fact, they were people from Washington were already at the newspaper over the course of, as we saw over the course of this episode. So they had that conversation, and then of course we get to the funeral shooting. So Louis decides to show up at the funeral. You have Louis, Jerome, Leon, Franklin, um, and Tanasi as well. And without the knowledge of Manboy, Khadijah pulls up with her two hitters, and they start bucking and They hit a couple people, but more importantly, they hit Louis. So Louis gets shot in the stomach. They pull off. They get away. Leon sees Khadijah, and Louis is shot. And again, this is why you have to stay off the internet, because this was of course all over the internet leading up to this. In terms of when people breaking down trailers or breaking down scenes that Louis was going to get shot. So it came to no surprise that Louis got shot. So she, they take her to the hospital. She goes, she's in surgery. Jerome, of course, is, besides himself. And, Louis, they leave us hanging in the balance of whether or not Louis lives or dies. We'll talk more about that. But the most important part of this scene was, of course, Louis being shot, and the fact that it was Khadijah who shot her without the knowledge, without Scully or Manboy's approval. So Khadijah, over the last couple of episodes, has been doing her own thing, killing Fatback, and now she shoots Louis at the funeral. Franklin and Teddy meet. We will get to Teddy's adventure later on in the episode, because it was an adventure in Nicaragua. So this is when Teddy had already returned back from Nicaragua. He gets the news. He catches up and gets the news that Franklin's dad has been talking to the newspapers. Warns Franklin, says, "Hey, you need to put a muzzle on your dad." Franklin, criticizes Teddy, saying, "I've been paging you for the last couple of days. Where have you been?" And they kind of come to an understanding in terms of what needs to be done. He tells her about the reporter. He tells her that he tried to talk to the reporter. He tried to talk to her. Teddy doesn't seem too happy about that, but what's done is done. And the last line that Teddy had really triggered something in Franklin, and we'll talk about that later on. He says, at this point, trust no one. And first of all, this is the first time Franklin spoke to Teddy sober in about 3 weeks. So sober Teddy is not as aggressive, he's not being an asshole to Franklin as he has been in their past meetings, especially when he was drunk after came to the club drunk. So you kind of get a sense that they, at that point, were on the same page in regards to what needed to be done, and they, both of them, over the course of this episode, over the course of the last 10 minutes of the episode, go and take care of business. Franklin, Tanasi, and Leon. So Tanasi, again, she's under pressure from Man Boy. She did a lot of talking in this episode in regards to asking Franklin questions and what have you. And she asked one too many. First of all, she tells Franklin, she could broker a deal with Man Boy. Let me help you out with Man Boy. Let me help fix this situation. So, I'll talk to Man Boy and what have you. So at that point, Franklin is tipped off by her asking so many questions. He gives Leon a curious look. He also tells Leon, look, you need to keep, tells Leon, not during this scene, but also told Leon, you need to keep an eye on Jerome. He tells Tanasi, yeah, go ahead, do it. Go ahead, talk to Man Boy. And after that, you knew that Franklin at this point was on to her. At this point, so he goes, and Leon goes back in the hospital, and Franklin goes and tells Peaches to go get the car, and then of course you had Franklin, Tanasi, and Peaches. So Tanasi's on the phone with Man Boy, and they are discussing. Tanasi tells Franklin that Man Boy is willing to tell Khadijah to back off if he gives him a piece of the plug. So that's the conversation that Tanasi has with Franklin, also at the hospital in front of Leon. Franklin sends Tanasi off and basically says, "Okay, go do it." Then Tanasi tells Man Boy is back in her house. Tells Man Boy that Franklin has agreed to the deal, and basically tells Man Boy, "Listen, I want my money, and I want my brother protected." So once she hangs up the phone, goes to sit down, and then we see Peaches and Franklin. Franklin, of course, has figured out that she's been playing him this entire time. Peaches point a gun at Tanasi and basically says, "How long you been playing me?" And the episode wraps up. So, a lot of moving pieces in this episode. You also had a conversation with Franklin and his mother in the hospital, in which she says she's getting out of LA, but not going without him. I'm not necessarily sure that I believe that. Maybe she's telling Franklin that to appease Franklin, but she says that she's getting out of LA. And of course, I didn't put this in the scenes, but they lost the investment deal with Ron Davis. Of course, Franklin is high as a firecracker right now. So Ron Davis gave Sissy back the money that they bought, the token, their appreciation that they gave to Ron Davis early on in the season. That money is back. They get their money back, and then Ron Davis at this point wants nothing to do with Franklin or Sissy, and that kind of pushes, and at that point, Sissy kind of sees the writing on the wall as far as, we will never be legitimate. No no investor is going to touch us right now. She recognizes that, tells Franklin that in the hospital, and that's when she comes to the conclusion that she needs to get out of LA. So again, themes: out of time. Franklin is running out of time as Man Boy gets closer and closer to the plug. We see Teddy Now let's get to Teddy real quick because Teddy went to Nicaragua and he saw that, of course, they're fighting this illegal war down there, and he saw the results of him not getting his peoples the weapons, the missing the guns. Of course, that trace that went all the way back to the 15 million that's been missing, and the 15 that allowed him to get the guns. So the missing shipment of guns came back to haunt Teddy in this episode. His peoples down there get completely wiped out. Animals, people, and his contact gets killed. He gets knocked out, and you have one of the militia leaders spare his life as she lets him go. She's the one that knocks him out, and she's basically about to kill him, about to slice his throat. And he of course takes full responsibility for what happened. She spares him. He gets away. He gets away, go and comes back to America to America. And of course, and Gustavo also stands up for Teddy as the CIA was looking for Teddy and in his files. They came by the office twice. The first time Gustavo had a gun, says you're not going anywhere. The second time Gustavo was gone and took all the files and everything out. So he was, we see Gustavo not knowing what Teddy's doing, but still loyal to Teddy regardless. And of course, Teddy gets to Irene. He gets to Irene, says, listen, and gives her a needle, says, next time you will not wake up. So Irene, so we saw Teddy and Franklin again try to take care of some loose ends in the last 10 minutes of the episode. And as far as MVP, it was Franklin Saint. I mean, Damson Idris was tremendous in this episode. He's great in every episode. He really stood out in this episode as he's trying to figure out who's playing him, as he's trying to navigate so many things coming at him. So it was no question that he was the MVP of this episode. I also thought the young lady that plays Tanasi, I think her name is I forgot what her name is in real life. She was great in this episode as well. So a lot going on in this episode. This was a tremendous episode, a fast-paced, a fast-moving episode to say the least. 2 episodes remain, and again, this has been a running theme over the course of this season. Franklin continues to lose things. You talk about his mother, talking about leaving LA. We see Louis get shot, and we see Tanasi is a traitor, and somebody. And I'm anticipating that he's probably going to have to kill Tanasi. That would be my guess. If I were to take a wild, I would think that he would have to kill her. So he continuously is losing things all around him. But the good news for Franklin, it seems like his relationships with Teddy and Leon have gotten a little bit stronger, in which he's going to need in these final 2 episodes as he tries to ward off Man Boy and Scully and Khadijah, for that matter, because Khadijah has become a problem, to say the least. I mean, she's become the most. I can make a case right now. Khadijah is the most dangerous character. Well, Man Boy is. You gotta say. You still gotta say, man. If I were ranking, who are the biggest threats to Franklin right now? And we rank them in order. I rank them Man Boy, Khadijah, and Scully in that order. To be honest with you, those are the biggest threats to one Franklin Saint. That's gonna wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast. I will have this episode up by the end of the night, and you can catch it wherever you find wherever you find podcasts available: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, on my YouTube channel, of course. Have a great rest of the day. I'll see you next time.